You are Locked On Hawks Postcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Good evening, everybody. Appreciate you guys for joining in. Hope that you have had a very good weekend so far. Of course, we know Super Bowl is tomorrow, but no matter what side of the fence you live on, whether it's the Chiefs or whether it's the Philadelphia Eagles, I guess that as long as you're a Hawks fan, you got off to a pretty good start on tonight. Got a very compelling show for everybody on the evening. Obviously, when you're talking about now another winning streak, that's 2 in a row now for the Atlanta Hawks, especially after coming off of, what was it, an 8-game losing streak or something, like two wins in the last like 10 games or something ridiculous like that. And of course, being able to get the big time win against the Washington Wizards. And I call that a big time win for a reason. I'll tell you here in just a second. 125-111 for the Atlanta Hawks over the Washington Wizards, of course, at the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. And got some interesting stuff I want to fill you guys in on, let you know what my brain is thinking as I was kind of watching this game and looking forward to this game. Some of the key things that I thought that the Hawks really needed to do before going into this game to be able to come away with adding a number to the left side of the result column. All of those things being said and considered, obviously what we'll talk about here on tonight is just competing I guess, quote, if you will, or just competing narrative around this team, and if that's either a good thing or a bad thing, because if we don't see anything else, then we're at least going to see them being competitive. That being first, obviously, then there's a break. On the other side of that break, segment number 2, we're going to talk a little bit about grading the new guys. Yes, Terance Mann, Georges Niang, and Caris LeVert as well. So we'll talk about how we saw them do in their debut on tonight as newly named Atlanta Hawks players for this particular roster. And of course, we'll close it out a little bit with what you believe that we need to see, and by what you need to see, meaning these next 2 games, obviously both of them on the road. One on Monday against the Orlando Magic, and then the other following that up will be the last game before the All-Star break. That will be on the road at, of course, none other than the New York Knicks. Everybody's favorite game, especially when you're an Atlanta Hawks fan. But before we jump into the very first segment, I would be remiss if I did not mention to you that today's episode of the Locked On Hawks Postcast is brought to you by Game Time. Today's episode of the show is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code Locked On NBA. I'm serious. You guys got to try this stuff out if you haven't done so already. I'm telling you that you're missing out. I'm not just saying this because it sounds cool and I'm getting extra money. You guys really have to check this out. Again, create an account, use the code Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Well worth it, especially if you get to a point where you kind of want to go and check out some games. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Let's jump into this game, shall we? Because this is one that I was looking forward to for some different reasons, right? I think more so than anything because I'll be really transparent. I kind of forgot about the fact that we had played the Washington Wizards the one game in the the in-season tournament or what have you, I guess like in group play, and had beaten them. Why? And honestly, I don't feel ashamed of it, and it's for a really good reason, and that being because what stuck out to me like a sore thumb was the back-to-back games that we played early in the season. I think it was October, maybe even November, and ended up losing. And that's what I really remember vividly and remember the most. And so because of that, of course, I wanted the Hawks to win, but even more so because that's what I was remembered by. I felt like they needed a win. And I hope that the game that they beat Washington, the one time that they did, that just really didn't play into an account. Now, I know that they can beat this Washington team and should have beaten the Washington team on tonight. So that's a good reason behind that it's good to, optimistic and some positivity there that they did that because they did what they were supposed to do. No matter if you didn't have Jalen Johnson, no matter if you didn't have Clint Capella, no matter if you didn't have DeAndre Hunter, no matter if you didn't have Bogey Bogdanovic, no matter if you didn't have, a backup point guard, if you will, you still did what you needed to do, what you had to do, and what you could do. What you had to do being the most important thing was to be able to beat this team. I think one of probably what I really thought that they needed to do in this game was first things first, close out on the shooters. That being one, Corey Kispert, who we know is going to come off the bench, but he can be really streaky of a shooter. And when he gets hot, it kind of reminds me in the sense, and I'm not saying he's this guy, obviously, but just reminding me in the sense in some ways of a guy that we used to have here in Atlanta, like a Kyle Korver, a guy who can get really, really hot, obviously. A little bit more athletic, got some athleticism to his game, but he is particularly a guy that I think can keep Washington in a game. So while it appears that he had pretty much a good game, 13.7 rebounds, 5 assists, little under 50% from the field, and all that's fine and dandy. Sure, that's cool, but they really needed to close out on him as a shooter from the perimeter, and they were able to do that as Corey Kispert shot 1 for 7 from 3. So obviously we could check that box. The other thing was that I believe that they needed to, convert on their threes. And we talk so much about the big three, right? That being the turnovers, that being converting from the free throw line, and that being the ability to knock down and convert from the perimeter and basically pop from 3, and force them to get the ball out of the net when you're shooting from 3. And that was something that I believe that they did a good job at as well. And the reason why that one was primarily, especially tonight, was so critical is because you do have 2 guys who I think are young, have nothing to lose. And I say young for a reason, because there is a little bit of, a little bit of play on words, if you will, when I say that, because you have Bilal Coulibaly, who typically and primarily had done such a good job on somebody like Trae Young on the defensive side of the ball, specifically and especially for the 2 games that the Hawks ended up losing to them. And even more so, a guy like a Bub Carrington, who had a pretty good game on tonight as well, and just appeared to be really active and very energetic. And just, these are guys that are just super confident, right? Young guys, and, really ready to get after it, knowing that they have to make their name in this league. Of course, offense and all that stuff is cool, but that's kind of like, a cherry on top. It's an extra bonus when you're able to see those guys perform the way that they do sometimes on the offensive end, because primarily their bread and butter is on the defensive end of the ball, especially when you're playing the Atlanta Hawks and Trae Young. So we've seen the kind of pressure and the kind of frustration that it appears sometimes when they play against that they provide when they play against somebody like a Trae Young. And it was just really important to be able to simplify the game and keep it really simple. That was something I think that this team was able to do, is to make sure that they are converting from 3, because Trae Young is going to give guys a lot of open look opportunities when guys are standing over there in the corner doing jumping jacks, because they're wide open because of the attention that Trae tends to draw so often. That's just a department where you have to be able to knock down those shots. And that's obviously, this being a team that sometimes you haven't really this year been able to say that all the time about, right? Especially when you don't have somebody like a Bogey that's playing consistently. DeAndre Hunter was obviously better at that, but you don't have like a ton of knockdown 3-point shooters. Even Zaccharie Risacher sometimes gets into this mode where he's playing really well and shooting it well from 3. But then other times he's not. You don't really see him having too many like decent games, if you will. And I just think that even in these situations with him, particularly where he's having decent games, they feel like they're just getting better and better. He's on an upward trajectory. if you will. So shout out to him. We'll talk about him here in a little bit, but 41% from three, especially because of Georges Niang. We'll talk about him in the next segment, is a big part of the reason as to why I think that's another box that we can just check. It was really crucial, I think, especially when you're comparing it to the first two games where you had, three players in each of those first two games that was able to play well and score over 20 points per game. 20 points in the game, and you have that many players that could do something like that. That's kind of like an Achilles heel and questionable for the Hawks from a defensive standpoint. Corey Kispert, Jordan Poole, Kyle Kuzma in the first game, all having 20 plus points. And then of course from a bench standpoint, you have somebody like the Washington Wizards who is able to outscore the Hawks from that standpoint, right? Then you look at game two, Jonas Valanciunas, Jordan Poole, Bilal Coulibaly, all three of those guys, 20 plus points apiece. Obviously, the bench ends up outscoring the Atlanta Hawks 44-18, abysmal, right? But in this particular game, you didn't have that situation. You only have Jordan Poole and Bub Carrington to hit for 20 points. You barely got that because Jordan Poole got his chance to get his 21, I guess, right? And then you have someone like the bench, where the bench was outscored by the Atlanta Hawks 39-30 for in comparison to those first two games. So some of those things I think are the differences between the first two games and tonight's game. Obviously not having Kyle Kuzma and so on and so forth, and not having the opportunity to see somebody like a Chris Middleton, who we just saw in that trade, is something that helped out the Atlanta Hawks a little bit as well. So those are just a little bit of my takeaways. Where is Mo Gay? I have no idea. I think I just received something like an email earlier saying that they were sending him back down to the G League, which I'm not completely thrilled with, because unless you've been living under a rock, everybody knows how I feel about Mo Gay and just loving Mo Gay and sound a little awkward, but nonetheless, Muhammad Gay is just one of those guys I've just been enamored with his confidence and just loving what he's bringing to the team. Obviously, not only just the last game, but every time I feel like I see him on the floor, he gives us a little bit of something different than what I'm used to seeing. Not the most production in the world, maybe not the most contribution in the world, but I feels like that he gives me something just different. Not more, not less, but just different than what I get out of some of the other guys. I'm not trying to boost the guy up to sound like an all-star by any means, but it's just something about him that I like. And I think it's probably his fearlessness that I think that he kind of showcases, right? So we'll just go with that for now. It also helped with the fact that, somebody like a Jordan Poole picked up his fifth foul with 4 minutes remaining left in the third quarter. That didn't help out a ton. And when you start factoring in that between Jordan Poole and someone like a Corey Kispert, they combined for what, 2 of 15 or something like that from three. I mean, the defense and closing out on some of those shooters helped, the Atlanta Hawks a lot tonight, and the fact, obviously, that they were hitting their threes. So that was big, really, really big for them. I was talking a little bit just a second ago about, a Zaccharie Risacher, right? And I've had this conversation with a couple other people, obviously, and it feels like a little bit more of an emergence. Now, I know there has been some big time games, 33 points against the Knicks, and I think 20 something to 30 against someone else. And it seems like you get these big boom or bust games from him. And we all know that it's a little bit different for him, coming along in the league as a number one pick and not having the same pressure on him as a typical number one pick. But I think we're starting to see some emergence. His impact has been insurmountable, in my opinion, being able to become a little bit more of a confident player. Yes, some bulk adding to his build. I think he's probably put on 10 pounds or something, they said, since the beginning of the season. But you can kind of see his game, not only from a maturation standpoint, but just slowly getting used to the NBA game. And you can see his confidence kind of building. And some of that even, I think, because he's kind of put in a position as to where he kind of has to bring that production and contribution, because you don't have a lot of other guys to be able to go to obviously without having someone like a Jalen Johnson who's out for the season, and then now a DeAndre Hunter who you had been kind of relying upon so much coming off the bench and at least giving you a smooth 20. You don't have that either. So I'm just kind of curious more so to know from you guys, where do you stand in regards to the competing part? Because this is something that they did the last game and they won, they competed. This is something that they did on tonight. They won, they competed. And that has the positive connotation to it. But the negative connotation to it sometimes is just like we saw in the 8-game losing streak. That's exactly what they did. They competed, but it was like they just competed. And so I think it just kind of teaches me a little bit about what type of I'm into people's minds. So I like that thought of, what goes into rather how you view the game, right? So what side of the fence do you live on when it comes to the team competing? Because I think everybody believes that it's such a good thing when they're competing. But when you have the stretch of games in which they did, where they still was equating into losses, although they were competing, it felt worse than it actually was sometimes because they were so close to being able to win. It's like some people are like, I'm tired of losing close games. Just blow me out completely, a little awkward sounding, but like just don't even give me a standing chance of being able to win the game, right? Or or I need to be able to win the game while competing. But I don't like to just compete knowing that I'm not going to win a game. And they didn't really do anything different from a competing standpoint in these last 2 games, specifically, even on games like tonight, which is another one that was on the road. So shout out to them for being able to get that done. We'll go over a little bit of some other things. Appreciate you guys. I see some of you guys in the comment section. I appreciate you guys for showing some love. We'll bring you guys up with some of your comments and talk about it a little bit more. And then obviously we're going to talk a little bit about grading some of the new players, the Terance Mann, the Georges Niang, the Caris LeVert on the other side of this break, as we gotta just kind of make sure that we get some bills paid. So let's go ahead and jump to that right about now. This episode of the Atlanta Hawks Postcast is brought to you by Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you can now enjoy the VIP treatment, receiving a 3% IRA match on retirement contributions. The privileges of the very privilege are no longer exclusive. With Robinhood Gold, your annual IRA contributions are boosted by 3%. Plus, you also get 4% APY on your cash in non-retirement accounts. That's over 8 times the national savings average. The perks of the high net worth are now available for any net worth. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. To receive your 3% boost on annual IRA contributions, sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk, course. Rate subject to change, of course. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold at $5 a month for 1 year from first match. Must keep funds in IRA for 5 years. Go to robinhood.com/boost. Over 8 times the national average savings account interest rate claim is based on data from the FDIC as of November 18th of 2024. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. Back with you guys. I appreciate everybody for kind of tapping in and kind of showing some love. I see a lot of you guys already tapping in. I'm grateful and appreciative of all of that. Robert Blackman, who's one of our usuals. Jeremiah Gibbons, appreciate you coming through, showing some love. Hadari Pro, we're gonna throw some stuff up here. King Phillip, I know he's a regular as well, so I appreciate you guys for showing some love. We're gonna get to some of these comments in a second. I'm curious to know how some of you guys are grading, and throw some of those grades up there as well, so we can throw them on the big screen. first and foremost, I think we got to throw out there the obvious, right? The Georges Niang, who was phenomenal on tonight. A lot of people are going to talk about the 16 points, what he was able to do from three. He hit 4 of those, which I feel like it was in a very short time span. It seems like it was much bigger than it actually was. And 4 threes is big at any point in time during any game. I almost don't care what the percent. I mean, if you took 10 of them, for crying out loud, and hit 4, 40% from 3 is not terrible either. But he only took 7 of those, and he hit 4 of them. So definitely got to give him some credit. And while I did mention on last night's postcast where I am a believer that making that move for him was something similar to what they feel like they can get back for or in exchange for someone like a Bogey Bogdanovic, right, who we hadn't seen on the floor a whole lot, but that you needed to be able to get someone that was a shooter. And one of my concerns, obviously, was when they made these moves for these newbies, and I'm just going to throw this up here real quick. When they made these moves for these newbies, my concern was that they didn't get a player in which I really believed could have filled their biggest needs. They didn't go and get a point guard, and I get it, the Bones Highland thing and all that kind of stuff, however. But obviously he's not an Atlanta Hawk, so that kind of cancels that out. And then you didn't really go and get a big to assist a Clint Capella and or Onyeka Okongwu with more than 1 or 2 moves to be able to get some offense going. Not even about stretching all the way to the 3-point line and all this other kind of stuff, turn him into a player that he's not ready to be, but just a guy who can maybe give a little pump fake and then a power dribble and a dunk, or, a guy that can, got a little bit of footwork to him and free throw extended, pump fake and go to the basket, spin move or half spin, turn around, jump hook, something like that, something in his repertoire besides, and this is not a knock, obviously, on Clint or on Onyeka, because Onyeka has certainly been proving himself to look a little bit better and a little bit more polished within his game. So I want to make sure I give him some credit there. But sometimes I feel like the Achilles heel for this team, or something that they kind of lack from time to time, is to be able to have a guy on the floor that can do more than just be the recipient of a Trae Young lob when Trae has the ball and then gives the quick first step move, gets his defender on his back behind him, and obviously draw the attention of the defender of who's guarding someone in the post. And then obviously he either going to go for the teardrop or the lob. And then obviously it ends up being a lob. But that was one of the concerns I kind of thought we had. As great of a guy as John Collins was, he ended up being a recipient of someone like that, where he maybe necessarily didn't have a lot of offensive moves, but he can catch and he can dunk. And that's something I think that this team has. But what do they have in the front court that could provide a little bit more than that? And I haven't seen that as of yet. And I thought that was one of the needs that they should have filled. But they were able to get some guys. We talked about the big three and things that they needed to get better at and improve at. That's the 3-point shooting. They did that on tonight with Georges Niang. I feel pretty confident in giving Georges Niang, I mean, it's his first night out. He ain't really went through a whole lot of practices, probably a lot of walkthroughs, shoot-arounds, things of that nature. I'm going to give him an A. I mean, as close to an A+ as an A+ could probably get without being an A+, being a solid A. I think that that's something that's, super solid. I think that's, in my opinion, you know what I mean? I think that that's something that's fair. With his 3-point shooting or whatever else, what have you. Sometimes I can maybe see him being a little bit of a liability on defense the way that Bogey was, but get him some time to work into the system. Then you have someone like a Caris LeVert came out tonight, 9 points, definitely could have shot in it a little bit better. But nonetheless, when I just saw some of the little sample sizes and little things as he's kind of getting adjusted, it didn't look bad. There's a lot of guys who come in and don't even have 9 points in their very first game in a team's new uniform without having a whole lot of opportunities to get used to the system, getting used to Trae, some of the likes and dislikes, or get, used to some of the things that they can kind of get accustomed to doing. It takes chemistry. And so I think 9 points, a solid night for tonight for someone like a Caris LeVert. And then obviously you got Terance Mann with his 4 points, which I don't get ridiculously discouraged by, if I'm just being honest, simply because of the fact, if I'm just being transparent, that he's a guy that I know can give me offensive firepower in bulk, right? It's not just coming from nowhere. He's a guy that I really do believe that that the LA Clippers had a hard time kind of giving up and was not willing to move him because of what he can actually do on the offensive side of the ball. If you saw him at Florida State here around in the area, then you're pretty familiar with what he's able to do. So I'm really confident about what he's going to be able to bring going forward, obviously not on a night like tonight. So I don't know. I'd probably give him a C and maybe give Caris LeVert probably about a C as well. They didn't look completely lost out there. So I want to be fair to both of those guys. Before we cut to a break, I made a promise. Obviously, we're going to get some of you guys' comments up here and get a little bit of responses to them. Jeremiah Gibbons, by the way, the grade letter B overall for Robert. Appreciate you for showing some love. Jeremiah says that Georges Niang already the best spot up shooter who's playable by far. I can see some of that in some ways. It appears that way, but I want to definitely not only give credit, even though we didn't see much tonight from a Garrison Matthews. How about Vit Krejci? And maybe he's not the greatest spot up per se. I think he brings probably the best balance between being a spot up shooter and a guy who can, quote unquote, create his own shot. 12 points for him, 8 rebounds, 7 assists. It's all the little things, just like Georges Niang. We talk about the 16 points. How about the 6 rebounds? Those things being very critical besides just the scoring. 7 assists for Vit as well. Shooting 50% from the field, shooting 50% from 3. I've talked a lot of crap about him over the years, called him number 99, whoever that guy is. I didn't call him Vit. I didn't call him Vit Krejci. I didn't call him Krejci. I called him number 99. And as disrespectful as that is, you guys know me. I'm always willing and open to being honest and say that I put my hand up in the air and say that, I'm seeing the growth, I'm seeing the development, and then I'm really glad that I'm wrong. So appreciate you for showing some love, Jeremiah. And then is this Harris? HXRRIS. I feel like an old man. I'm 40, bro. I can't keep up. Harris Laurent. Center market was dry. Most of the dudes available are injury prone. I can see some of that as well as we were talking about Clint Capella and Onyeka Okongwu. Appreciate you for showing some love and coming through. Come back sometime. Jeremiah Gibbons, come back. I personally like our centers until they maybe trade for some. And I think that it is a little bit of a watered down market or what have you a little bit. Robert's showing some love again, giving Mann a C-. I can see some of that. Giving Vit Krejci a B. I think that that's really fair. I'm almost willing to give him a little bit more probably than a B. I think this probably feels like an A game from a Vit Krejci based on how balanced how balanced that it was. Hadari Pro showing some love as well. Said Nance been giving us some good minutes, especially because I think he's still kind of nursing that hand injury a little bit. That's something I think that has been very big as well. When you're looking at Nance, 14.6 rebounds, hit 2 threes, stretching defenses out a little bit. I think, what is that? I think he shot 33% from 3 on tonight or something like that. I think he went 2 for 6 or something. But a guy like him, I'm not really worried so much about. I mean, he's not a prolific 3-point shooter or perimeter threat by any means. Anything you get from him on the perimeter, I think is a little bit of a bonus. So, definitely want to give him some credit, want to give him some flowers for what, his contributions on tonight, considering the hand injury. And I think he's still kind of nursing that a little bit. So I would definitely want to be fair to him, but 14 points when he's definitely needed. Onyeka Okongwu not having a great game. Clint Capella didn't play on tonight. I don't think we've seen Dom either. So much of that weight really relied upon somebody like a Larry Nance, especially as a veteran for this particular team. I thought that was really big for him as well. Let's go ahead and pay some more bills on the other side of it. We're going to talk about what we need to see from this team. What do you need to see from this team before the All-Star break? And obviously, like I said, they've got 2 more games. We'll talk about those 2 games on the other side of the break after these messages. Affordable tickets to your favorite sporting event, comedy show or concert, I guess, can appear so hard to come by, but it shouldn't be, because there's only one right answer. Where else other than Game Time? I'm serious, guys. Like, you really got to tap into this Game Time thing. I know you guys heard me talking about it a little bit at the beginning of the show. If you leave immediately right now after this postcast, you may be able to make the trip to the Big Easy just in time for Super Bowl 59 to see the Chiefs and the Eagles. Don't be the token guy, or a pretty young lady for that matter, in the parking lot watching from the outside in, or watching from the bar, maybe even settling for the same old friend's house like you do every single year, taking off your shoes at the door and scraping the corners of that pan of the leftovers for a little bit of a to-go plate. Be inside the game, because tickets are still available on Game Time. Take it from me, I literally just purchased mine for March Madness. You guys know how excited I am about that next month, and they gave me the best bang for my buck. So, Game Time Picks have never been easier. Let me tell you how it works with Game Time Picks. The app does all the work for you. It curates, the best deals to where you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings, and even more so, probably the best part is you're covered with Game Time's lowest price guarantee. If you find a better deal elsewhere, which I'm pretty sure that you won't, but just in case you do, they'll refund you 110% of the difference. Plus, your tickets are always guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation options if something comes up, just in case. Sometimes life be lifing. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, of course. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA, locked on NBA, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. The last minute tickets, if that's what you need, lowest prices guaranteed. Perfect. Back with you guys here just for a couple of minutes. I promise it's just going to be a couple quick segment real quick. Talking about what you guys need to see before the All-Star break. What are some of those things? I'll tell you what I need to see. I definitely need to see the turnovers get cut down a little bit more. I get it, and I'm trying to ease up off of them a little bit. It's only been 12, but I think some of these occasionally unforced errors that I tend to see from this team where they're giving the ball up is for two reasons. Number one, not having the backup point guard. Sometimes I think Trae, we look for all this perfection, especially with him being the top assist guy in the league. That can wear on anybody. You're not going to be perfect. Sometimes being able to give a guy like that a break, bring somebody else in, maybe like a veteran. Tonight we saw something similar with like Malcolm Brogdon, who can be able to give guys a little bit of a break. Sometimes I think that's what kind of equates into some of these turnovers. So that's one of the things, obviously. And then I don't know. I feel like when it comes to the turnovers, it's, you're still getting used to playing, with a new roster. It feels like every single night, you never know who's going to be on the floor. You're still learning who's on the floor. Some of these guys has been, new within just one game. Some of these guys are just earning more and more and more minutes. Obviously, Vit Krejci and some of the others. When you don't have that backup point guard, sometimes it's tough. But I really believe that they're trying to get the ball to the right places. Sometimes they get a little ahead of their skis, a little overly anxious, if you will. And we tend to see them look like they know what they're trying to do up here, but aren't able to put it together from this standpoint. And I think that they will ultimately and eventually kind of get better at that. So I do want to see the turnovers kind of come together. Certainly the free throw shooting, I think definitely. I think earlier in the week, we saw them have like a 82% free throw shooting game. And I would like for it to be more. I mean, look at what happened on a night like tonight. I think Washington 91% at the half, 95% at the games for the game, something along those lines, what have you. It'll be nice if we can get, and I know that may be unrealistic to a degree, but it'll be nice if we can get closer to the mid 80s to late 80s instead of, being in the being in the 70s for a lot of the games. I think I saw a 66 earlier this week, something along those lines. So just kind of curious to know what you guys want to see, because that's one of the things that I definitely would like to see. And obviously, Robert, who has been listening to the show, taking a peek at the answer key, why don't you? And probably just living in my head rent free, talking a little bit about the free throws and even the rebounds. And I think even on the rebounds, as far as tonight, this one was very telling for me tonight too, Robert. We're talking about the rebounds, which I do agree with you in many ways. And I think that's another reason that they need another one of those bigs that can help rebound. I mean, Nance is cool. Getting rid of Roddy, I don't think is the greatest thing in the world. Doesn't help them a lot. Clint not having Clint a lot, and just Onyeka only being the one person who's not used to starters minutes by any means, getting more and more used to it, but not completely used to it, I think is something that this team can kind of improve upon. But when you start looking at where they were at the half, they were being out rebounded by 10, 31-21. They turned that around in the second half. And this is a credit to this team, particularly in the second half, 41-53 from a rebound edge. They held Washington to only 10 rebounds in the second half. I thought that was huge. And meanwhile, they ended up with 22 more rebounds in the second half, talking about the Atlanta Hawks. So I think that helped them out a whole lot from that standpoint. And shout out to the Hawks, man. They got a big one that's going to be coming up here in the next couple of days as we're talking about what we need to see. 2 games left, both of them on the road, one of them against the Orlando Magic, who doesn't quite look like the same team as they were last year, but still a really good team nonetheless. Definitely don't want to count your chickens before that, and just taking one game at a time, I think, is the smartest thing for this Hawks team. And then obviously the other thing being the other game being the one that everybody's probably looking forward to the most, being the New York Knicks on the road, I think at Madison Square Garden all over again. So I mean, at this point, we're talking about Trae Young going back to Madison Square Garden. This is not a Hawks team that I want to. If I'm the opposition, I don't want to see the Atlanta Hawks in regards to when they are put into position, of being an underdog. So appreciate you guys for joining me. Make sure you check out my dude, man. Brad Rowland does a fantastic, outstanding job over at the Locked On Hawks. Everybody that's checked in and tapped in with us on tonight, man, signing off for Tanisha Batiste, DeShaun Tate. We'll see you guys back here in about 48 hours when we talk about hopefully a win. Fingers crossed. Only talking about a win over the Orlando Magic. I'll see you guys in a minute. 48 hours from now. Peace out. A-Town down.